Two women are talking over the garden wall, and the conversation turns to money. You know, Lauren, I've discovered a great way to get more money out of my old man. Last week, I wore a low-neck jumper when we went shopping, and as I bent over the supermarket freezer, one of my boobs popped out. You should have seen Bill. He nearly had a blue fit. I told him it was because I didn't have enough money to buy a new bra, so he's increased my housekeeping. You ought to try it. The following week, the two women met up for another chat, and Lauren was asked if she had taken her friend's advice. "Oh, it was a disaster," exclaimed Lauren. "We were just about to go down to bingo when I lifted my skirt and told my husband I had no knickers on because I couldn't afford to buy any. The old skinflint threw me a quid and told me to buy a comb. 'At least you can look tidy,' he said." An 85-year-old grandfather was rushed to the hospital with no memory and brain damage. The doctor asked him a series of questions. "Do you know where you are?" "I'm at Rex Hospital." "What city are you in?" "Raleigh." "Do you know who I am?" "Dr. Hamilton." The old grandfather then turned to the nurse and said, "I hope he doesn't ask me any more questions." "Why?" she asked. "Because all of those answers were on his badge." A grandmother was shopping at the supermarket with her young grandson, riding in the cart. Every time she picked up an item, she'd smile at him and say, "Here's your favorite cereal, Scholar." A minute later, she'd grab a carton of milk. "And we'll get this for you too, Scholar." Then it was cookies. "You'll love these, Scholar." A woman shopping nearby couldn't help overhearing the conversation. After a few aisles, her curiosity got the better of her. "Excuse me," she asked politely. "Why do you keep calling your grandson Scholar? Is that his nickname?" The grandmother chuckled. "No, dear. My son spent 4 years at college, and this is the only degree he ever brought home." After a long 12-hour shift at work, a man finally dragged himself through the front door. He barely had enough energy to eat dinner before collapsing into bed. Just as he was about to fall asleep, his wife rolled over with a mischievous smile. "Can I ask you something?" she whispered. "Sure," he mumbled, already half asleep. "What would you do if I told you there was a gorgeous, funny, absolutely perfect woman lying right beside you?" Without even opening his eyes, the man smiled tiredly and replied, "I'd thank my lucky stars." His wife grinned. "Ah, that's sweet." He yawned and added, "Then I'd roll over before she realized she'd picked the wrong guy." Last Saturday, I woke up at 5 in the morning for a fishing trip I'd been planning all week. Trying not to wake my wife, I quietly got dressed, packed my tackle box, made a thermos of coffee, and loaded everything into the truck. The moment I pulled out of the driveway, the rain started. 5 minutes later, the wind picked up. By the time I reached the highway, it was absolutely pouring. The weather report came on the radio. Strong winds, heavy rain, and thunderstorms expected all day. I sighed, turned the truck around, and headed back home. I slipped quietly into bed, wrapped my arm around my wife, and whispered, "It's absolutely miserable out there." Without opening her eyes, she mumbled, "I know. My poor husband is probably sitting by a lake right now, thinking he's Bear Grylls." That's the exact moment I decided fishing would have been the safer option. There was this virgin that was going out on a date for the first time, and she told her grandmother about it. So, the grandmother says, "Sit here and let me tell you about those young boys. He's going to try to kiss you. You're going to like that, but don't let him do that. He's going to try to feel your breast. You're going to like that, but don't let him do that. He's going to try to put his hand between your legs. You're going to like that, but don't let him do that. But most important, he's going to try to get on top of you and have his way with you. You're going to like that, but don't let him do that. It will disgrace the family." With that bit of advice, the granddaughter went on her date and could not wait to tell her grandmother about it. The next day, she told her grandmother that her date went just like she said. But, she said, "Grandmother, I didn't let him disgrace the family. When he tried, I turned over, got on top of him, and disgraced his family." A man with a constant twitch in one eye applied for a customer service job at a large electronics company. The interviewer looked through his resume and smiled. "Your qualifications are outstanding. Great education, excellent references, and years of experience. Honestly, you'd be a perfect fit. He paused. There's just one problem. That constant eye twitch might make customers think you're winking at them. It could lead to some awkward misunderstandings. The applicant smiled. Actually, it's easy to fix. Really? Yes. 2 allergy tablets usually stop it within a minute. Go ahead and show me. The man reached into his backpack and started searching. Out came a phone charger, sunglasses, snacks, receipts, a flashlight, spare batteries, tissues, 3 pens, a tiny sewing kit, and finally a packet of allergy tablets. He swallowed 2 pills, and within moments the twitch disappeared. The interviewer looked impressed. That's amazing. Then he glanced at the pile of random items covering the desk. You certainly travel prepared. The applicant laughed. You have no idea. The interviewer pointed at the flashlight, batteries, sewing kit, and everything else. Why on earth do you carry all this stuff around? The applicant sighed. Have you ever tried shopping with one eye constantly twitching? People keep pointing me to the emergency supplies aisle instead of the medicine aisle. A man arrived at work on Monday morning with a huge bruise on the side of his face. His coworkers gathered around immediately. What happened to you? The man sighed. It happened at church. Everyone laughed. At church? Come on. What really happened? He shook his head. I'm serious, he explained. We were all standing during the service, and the lady in front of me had the back of her dress caught awkwardly. So, I thought I was being polite. I quietly fixed it for her. And she turned around and slapped me so hard I nearly sang the next hymn in a different key. The office couldn't stop laughing. A week later, the same man came to work looking even worse. This time he had a black eye, a swollen lip, and a bandage on his forehead. His coworkers burst out laughing. Don't tell us church again? He nodded. The very same church. What happened this time? Well, the same lady was sitting in front of me, and once again her dress got caught. The guys all shouted, Please tell us you left it alone this time. He sighed. I was going to, but the man next to me reached over and fixed it. So, I remembered she hated that, so I put it back the way it was. 3 pregnant women are sitting in a cafe, having lunch, when one of them says, I know that I'm going to have a boy. The other 2 women think about that for a moment, and then one of them says, Okay, how do you know you're going to have a boy? Well, when the child was conceived, says the first woman, I was on top, so I'm going to have a boy. They sit and eat for a few minutes more, and then the second woman says, Well, I'm going to have a girl. Okay, says the first one. How do you know you're going to have a girl? Well, when my child was conceived, I was on the bottom, so I'm going to have a girl. They sit and eat for a few minutes more, the third woman obviously getting more and more distressed, until finally she breaks down into horrible sobbing. What's wrong? What's wrong? The first 2 women ask with concern. The third woman manages to stifle her sobs long enough to only say one thing. I'm going to have a puppy. A week before his birthday, little Tommy asked his parents for the newest gaming console. His dad smiled awkwardly. Buddy, I'd love to get it for you, but money's really tight right now. We got bills piling up, the car needs repairs, and we're trying to save every penny. Tommy looked disappointed but nodded. The next morning, his father came downstairs and saw Tommy standing by the front door with a backpack, a pillow, and his favorite teddy bear. Whoa, his dad said. Where do you think you're going? Tommy shrugged. I've decided to leave. His father stared at him. Leave? Why? Tommy said, Last night I walked past your bedroom and heard you tell Mom, I think it's time we move on. His dad's eyes widened. Then I heard Mom say, I'm right behind you. Tommy zipped up his backpack and headed for the door. Well, if you 2 are moving on, I'm not staying here alone with all those bills. And without my game console. A group of retirees were sitting together in the lounge of a retirement home, enjoying tea and chatting about how getting older had changed their lives. One man sighed. My knees are so stiff now that climbing 3 steps feels like hiking a mountain. Another nodded. That's nothing. I need my glasses just to find the glasses I was already wearing. A woman chuckled. My hands shake so much, I spill half my coffee before I get it to my mouth. An older gentleman leaned forward. What was that? Everyone smiled. She said she spills her coffee. Oh, he replied. I thought someone was asking about bingo. Another man rubbed his shoulder. My back hurts every morning, and by lunchtime the rest of me joins in. The group laughed knowingly. Finally, one cheerful lady set down her teacup and said, Well, we're still luckier than a lot of people. Everyone looked at her. She smiled proudly and added, At least every one of us still thinks we're the best driver on the road. One bright, beautiful Sunday morning, everyone in the tiny town of Johnstown got up early and went to the local church. Before the services started, the townspeople were sitting in their pews and talking about their lives, their families, etc. Suddenly, Satan appeared at the front of the church. Everyone started screaming and running for the front entrance, trampling each other. Soon everyone was evacuated from the church, except for one elderly gentleman who sat calmly in his pew, not moving, seemingly oblivious to the fact that God's ultimate enemy was in his presence. Now this confused Satan a bit, so he walked up to the man and said, Don't you know who I am? The man replied, Yep, sure do. Satan asked, Aren't you afraid of me? Nope, sure isn't, said the man. Satan was a little perturbed at this and queried, Why aren't you afraid of me? The man calmly replied, Been married to your sister for over 48 years. A man's wife went missing while snorkeling during a weekend holiday at the coast. Rescue teams searched until sunset but couldn't find her, so the man spent a sleepless night fearing the worst. Early the next morning, there was a knock at his hotel door. Outside stood two Coast Guard officers. The older one removed his cap and said, Sir, we've got some difficult news, but we've also got a bit of good news, and possibly even more good news after that. The man took a deep breath. Let's hear the bad news first. The officer nodded. I'm very sorry, but we found your wife. She didn't survive. The man was devastated and had to sit down for a moment. After collecting himself, he quietly asked, And the good news? The officer smiled awkwardly. Well, when we recovered her, there were several large lobsters and some enormous crabs clinging to the area where we found her. He handed the man a cooler. We figured you should have these. The man looked inside. Those are incredible. He managed a weak smile. I suppose that's something. Then he looked up. So, what's the other good news? The older officer glanced at his partner and said, Well, the tide comes back in tomorrow morning, and we're thinking of checking the same spot again. Two shepherds were sitting on a hillside at sunset, watching their flock slowly settle in for the evening. After a long silence, one of them turned to the other and asked, So, how are things? The second shepherd let out a deep sigh. Honestly, not great. My back hurts all the time, the bills keep piling up, half my sheep keep wandering off, my kids barely call anymore, and now my wife says she's had enough. His friend nodded sympathetically. That's a lot for one man to carry. The shepherd stared across the field and muttered, Sometimes I don't know what to worry about first. His friend smiled, gave him a friendly pat on the shoulder, and said, Well, whatever you do, don't lose any sheep over it. Two friends decided they were finally going to try duck hunting after watching a few hunting shows online. Neither of them had ever been hunting before, but they were convinced it couldn't be that difficult. They bought camouflage jackets, packed a cooler full of snacks, and spent the entire morning wandering through the marsh. Hours passed. Not a single duck came anywhere near them. One of the friends sighed and said, I don't get it. We've been out here all day. Everyone says this place is full of ducks. The other scratched her head. Yeah, I've been thinking about that. So what are we doing wrong? She looked at the eager Labrador sitting beside them and said, I think I finally figured it out. What? We're probably not throwing the dog high enough for the ducks to notice him. One morning, the teacher decided to quiz the class on basic counting. She looked at little Johnny and asked, Johnny, have you been practicing your numbers at home? Johnny smiled proudly. Yes, ma'am. My dad's been teaching me every evening. The teacher was pleased. That's great. Let's see how much you've learned. She started with a few easy questions. What comes after 2? 3. Excellent. What comes after 8? 9. Very good. The teacher nodded with approval. Looks like your father has done a wonderful job. Johnny beamed. Then she asked one final question. All right, Johnny, what comes after 11? Without missing a beat, Johnny grinned and said, 12. He paused for a second. Unless Dad's playing cards. The teacher looked puzzled. Johnny smiled and added, then it's Queen. A man was walking away from a river, carrying a large cooler that looked suspiciously heavy. Just before he reached the parking lot, a wildlife officer stopped him. Good afternoon, sir, the officer said. Mind telling me what's in the cooler? The man smiled. My ducks. The officer frowned. Your ducks? That's right, the man replied. They're my pet ducks. The officer folded his arms. Really? Every evening I bring them down to the river, let them swim around for an hour, and when I clap my hands, they come waddling right back into the cooler. The officer laughed. Sir, that's impossible. The man shrugged. See for yourself. Curious, the officer agreed. The man opened the cooler and released several ducks into the river. They happily swam away. 1 minute passed, then 5, then 10. Finally, the officer looked impatiently at the man. Well, what? The man asked. Aren't you going to call your ducks back? The man looked confused. What ducks? 3 robbers had just pulled off a jewelry store heist and were running through the countryside with the police right behind them. Desperate to hide, they spotted an old farm and rushed into a storage shed. Inside were 3 large wooden crates. Without thinking, each robber climbed into one. A few moments later, 2 police officers entered the shed. One officer tapped the first crate with his baton. From inside came, "Bah." The officer nodded. Just a sheep. He walked over to the second crate and gave it a kick. Quack, quack. Must be some ducks, he said. Then he reached the third crate. He knocked on it. Silence. He kicked it. Still nothing. Now suspicious, he backed up and gave the crate one huge kick. There was another long silence. Finally, an angry voice shouted from inside. Honestly, have you never seen a crate of potatoes before? An elderly couple had been married for more than 30 years. One morning, they were enjoying coffee when the husband stretched, smiled, and said, You won't believe the dream I had last night. His wife looked up from the newspaper. Oh, tell me. He grinned. I dreamed you packed your bags, walked out the front door, and left me after all these years. She laughed. That doesn't sound like a dream. No. She smiled. That sounds like your worst nightmare. The husband shook his head. No. He took another sip of coffee. It was definitely a dream. How can you be so sure? He smiled and replied, Because in the dream, you apologized before you left. 3 women escaped from prison late one night and found themselves running through the countryside with police cars closing in behind them. After several minutes of running, they spotted an old abandoned barn. Quick, the brunette whispered. Let's hide in there. Inside the barn, they found 3 large grain sacks lying in a corner. With no time to think, each woman climbed into one just as the police burst through the door. The officers searched every corner of the barn until one of them noticed the sacks. He walked over and gave the first sack a firm kick. From inside came, Woof, woof. The officer nodded. Just a dog. He kicked the second sack. Meow, meow. Nothing but a cat. Then he walked over to the third sack and gave it a hard kick. Silence. He frowned and kicked it even harder. After another long pause, a voice suddenly shouted from inside. Grain. The officers looked at each other. The voice quickly added, I mean wheat. Lots and lots of wheat. A grumpy old biker rode into a roadside biker bar and noticed a sign hanging behind the counter. Free beer for life if you can pass our biker challenge. Curious, he walked up to the bartender and asked, What's this challenge all about? The bartender grinned. 3 simple tasks. The biker raised an eyebrow. Simple? That usually means trouble. The bartender continued. First, you have to drink a full gallon of our extra hot chili whiskey. The biker nodded. All right, what's next? Second, You have to go into the garage and fix our old motorcycle engine that hasn't started in 20 years. The biker smiled. Not too bad. And the third? The bartender pointed upstairs. Finally, there's a woman up there who has never been kissed by a biker. You have to make her happy. The old biker laughed. That's the dumbest challenge I've ever heard. He walked outside and rode away. Several hours later, the biker returned. He was completely drunk, wearing his leather vest backwards, and walking like the road was moving underneath him. He slammed his hand on the bar. All right, I'm ready for the challenge. The bartender looked worried. You sure about this? The biker nodded. Bring it on. The bartender handed him the gallon of chili whiskey. The old biker grabbed it and started drinking. His face turned red, his eyes watered, smoke practically came out of his ears. But somehow, he finished the entire gallon. Everyone in the bar cheered. The bartender couldn't believe it. Okay, tough guy. Time for the motorcycle repair. The bikers stumbled into the garage at a few minutes past. Then they heard bang, crash, clang, the sound of tools flying everywhere. After 20 minutes, the biker walked back into the bar. His clothes were covered in grease. His beard was full of oil. His hands were shaking. The bartender stared. You actually fixed the engine? The biker looked confused. Fixed? No idea. Then what happened? The biker wiped his face and said, Okay, now where's that motorcycle with the sore tooth? The husband comes home worried because he has a scratch on his chest caused by a fingernail from his mistress. Opens the door, seeing the cat asleep on the couch, and gives him a tremendous kick. The cat screams, a loud meow, and runs out the door. The wife comes in the living room and asks what happened, and he angrily replies, This cat seems crazy. I was walking in, and just like that, he jumped on me and scratched me on the chest. Look at that hell of scratch. The woman replied, You did very well. Today this fool bit my ass and gave me one hell of a hickey on my neck.